Peggy Hall here.
Ed Hedges.
Sharon Cordy here.
Daniel Potter, Public Works.
Laura Leroy here.
Okay. All right, we don't have to do a pledge?
No,
do we?
it's not. We're just
Okay.
talking.
All right, so our purpose here today is to go through our budget initiative. Let's start with the actual timeline, Laura, if you can pull that up. Just so that we're all on the same page.
Where'd I put it?
Uh,
It's not in there.
oh, okay.
I'll get it moved over.
Okay, well, regardless, we are in good timing with this this event. We do have to have a finalized draft to Laura May 7th, was it?
Yeah, your May meeting.
When?
May meeting. May 7th. Here.
It'll be the 9th, actually.
9th, okay.
That's your meeting. Is
Okay.
the 9th, so you'll have to decide, so I can get it to the board for their meeting the next week.
Okay. So,
That's the high water budget.
Yes.
and then the CDD staff takes over and sends out the notice, and then we come back and we know if we need to. But that high water mark is what we need to get to. Thank you for bringing that up.
So this is the overall, this is not your budget
Yes.
timeline, but this is the overall. So I'm gonna be, I'm off next week, but I'm setting up meetings with department heads. And when I get back that next week to go over our internal budgets, they're in your agenda today. There are draft budgets from each of the committees. So I think the first topic on the discussion today is for you as PPAC to kind of look over and see what your big picture projects are that you'd like to get done this year, things that you'd like to do. And then we get down into the more granular level when we start looking at the individual subcommittees.
Okay.
So you can see like every year, it's a statutory requirement that the board must adopt or not adopt, they must approve the high water mark by June 15th. That's a Florida requirement. That's not our rule. So the last day before that, that's a work day, would be actually the 14th, but I'm hoping that they'll do it at their June 6th meeting.
Well, I think we're going to be in good shape to get what we need to them. So if you look at the budget initiative discussion, section A in here, this is what staff is recommending for our discussion points today. So I don't know if you guys would prefer to go through it by committee. What would be your preference?
I'd prefer to go through it by committee.
Same here.
Okay, let's do that then. All right, if you're back out of that then.
I guess first is ponds then. Lucky.
Ponds goes first, Doug. All right, workshop wise, can I call Doug up?
Yeah, they were all invited,
Yes.
so therefore I shouldn't say allowed, but the way that the workshop rules are, because they were invited to meeting, they can come up and talk.
Sounds good, thank you.
Just please announce who you are and why you're here. You can bend that down, everybody just shoves it out of the way.
That was for Mark. We thought Mark was going
It's on
to.
the other side.
Doug Zander, I'm the chair of the Ponds Group. I'm here to present the first draft of the budget for the Ponds Group. Bottom line, I put together this thing with contracts that we currently have in place. On the right, I'm colorblind, even though I use color here. On the far right, those things that are highlighted are things that were not in last year's budget. So if you look at last year's budget, those things were not in it. And that's a total of almost 40,000. Go the last number, 39,783. Or stuff that we were not doing last year. It was some other group, whether it was, some of it was KW and the O&M agreement, some of it was PPCA, the fountains were PPCA in the middle of the three ponds, that we picked them up. Some of the stuff we had to pick up because when Tony did the thing from an asset standpoint, it was Gateway's asset, so we picked it up. So bottom line, our budget went up 31,000, but from prior year, and we picked up 39,000 of expense. So it's really it depends on the way you look at it. But we picked up 39,700 and we accounted for 31 in an increase. The big project here for next year is 300,000. If you talk about big picture, bank erosion is 300,000 in the budget for bank erosion for the next. We are doing one pond now, and we might be able to do two ponds with that because they're much smaller. The biggest pond, the biggest animal we're dealing with now this year. Any line item questions?
Doug, on the staff recommendations for discussion here was a pond repair program and a stormwater cleaning program. Are those
Correct.
included in your operating budget?
Yes. Okay, the stormwater cleaning program is in the operating budget. Actually, it will be done this year. It was with extreme divers. I think this year I'm putting off the interconnect until the current year because of the fact that the restoration of Pond 36 came back about double what we had budgeted, over double. And I think I sent you, except chairperson number 2, I don't know who that is, that got returned and rejected. But I sent you a note that we are going to have to do dewatering. I just wanted to
Okay.
inform you, but one of the people here got rejected, so I don't know who chairperson 2 is. Okay? Any other questions?
So do we know if the 39,000 is being removed from somebody else's budget, or was that just,
Well,
we don't know where it was coming from?
Well, it depends on what you negotiate with the KW O&M agreement, correct? I mean, some of that was in there.
Okay,
Okay.
So it might have
was
just been
totally
fallout from
It was
that.
totally removed as of the day, but it could be, put back in. The fountains was in PPCA. The maintenance of the fountains was in PPCA. It's probably a nit when you look at the big
Yeah,
picture
for
from
sure.
their perspective.
all right.
So as my old boss used to say, where can you come up with 4.76 cut someplace?
Probably, if we had to do a cut, we probably would do maybe less bank restoration, since you go to the biggest line item, if you know how that works.
Yeah.
Alan, you go to the biggest line item with 300,000, and instead of doing two ponds, banks, you might end up doing one. Or do them a different way, where you do a smaller one versus a bigger one. But that's about the only place, because a lot of these are maintenance agreements that are in place. We got to maintain the banks. We got to keep the aerators running, things like that, which if you go down there, where's that at? That's here. Ongoing expenses, and then the maintenance is 300,000 of the 510 is the bank restoration. So the only way you could reduce this budget is to do less in pond bank restoration and extend that further out of how long it'll take us to do that.
Well,
What's
we
the-
haven't heard from the other two groups yet, but I think it's always the goal to try to reach a flat budget.
Exactly.
And so I guess it kind of depends on what the other two.
What
groups
I
think.
said is, this though was a negative budget. If you look at the things we were asked to pick up from the current, that we did was not part, if you look at year on year, this budget went down by about $8,000.
Okay,
Not actually $8,900 and some dollars. Okay, and it's because of the things highlighted that were not in last year's budget or this year's budget. So it depends on the way you look at it. One person will look at that and say, bottom line, your budget went up. Okay, your budget went up by 3.86%.
Yep.
But if you look at it, we picked up 4.76% of things that we weren't doing in last year's budget.
but somebody else's should have gone down that amount.
Well, how much did the O&M, right now, as we speak, the KW O&M agreement, how much did that go down? As we speak.
60,000.
It's
Huh?
0.
Well, no, I mean, it went down 50-some thousand dollars, right? Right now, as we speak, there's no agreement in place. Some of these things were in their budget.
Okay.
And it's gone. The things in PPCA, like I said, the fountain maintenance of the three big fountains is a nit in the PPCA. I don't even think you could see where that decrease was in their budget. It would be that small compared to their total budget.
The budget for the O&M agreement for 23 was $416,000.
But for 24, it was $60,000.
I know, I
So-
was going there, Laura. And then last year, because everything was taken out of the O&M agreement, was dropped down to 60, which would be for actually to zero. Dropped down to zero. So that's what's Doug's running into. There were things that were paid under the O&M agreement that are still sorting out and coming through. So
That's not accurate. Only thing, you know.
Right, and this stuff from 23 was actually shifted over and shared across the landscape and safety and security group.
Well,
So,
I think we understand the concept
Yeah.
at this point, so, any other questions for Doug? Thank you, Doug. Nice job on it.
thanks, Doug.
Who's our next victim?
I think you,
I don't see Jen, so.
Mark Eversman, 10540 Bella Vista Drive, chairperson of the landscaping subcommittee. I guess I'm in a different position for the fact that I underran my budget substantially last year. This is the first year, big learning process as far as we were concerned. Not quite sure how we ended up with the surplus that we did, but it's obviously better to be that way than looking for money. Going forward, I guess my concern that I have coming up have nothing, in my opinion, to do with landscaping. For whatever reason, this subcommittee is expected to pay for 3 benches, which is about $15,000. Daniel's helping with that. Painting as you're coming into the entrance, which by the time we do that, and if we do colonial and tree line, that'll probably end up around $20,000. So as a landscape person, that's kind of out of our normal realm. We also have Christmas lighting, which we do have a budget for that. So that is all part of the landscape group. The one thing that I have a concern with is the electric that's in the ground is, I think Daniel will admit, it's pretty much junk. And I have no idea what it's going to cost to rework the electric, the lighting on the cul-de-sacs, the lighting on the trees as you come in. That's all been cut, spliced. Some of it is not working. I have no idea what kind of number we're looking at on that.
And you're not talking just holiday lighting, then
No,
you're talking
no, general lighting, not the street lighting.
Right,
General lighting across monuments and common areas.
thank you.
So that for me is a big wild card that is supposed to come out of, as I understand, the landscaping subcommittee budget.
We'll call you landscaping and hardscaping, is that?
Whatever you want to call it. But my goal is to be budget neutral. So at this point, we're lacking in a couple line item areas. So we just kind of move the money from one line item to another where we believe we have excess coming up. And that's what I would intend to do for next year, to try and basically keep absorbing whatever things keep popping up out of my existing budget. And I know some of the other subcommittees are looking for funds such as Doug, safety and security. And I guess at this point, what I can offer, if it's not really mine to offer, what I can suggest is the money that we had left over from last year to be allocated towards putting it in for their budget shortfall.
Okay.
And again, it's not a long-term solution, as that is obviously a finite amount of money, but it is a potential solution to at least get us through a few years.
And if you were asked to come up with 5% in the Allen approach here, what would you do?
At this point, I'm waiting on Ameriscape to give me some decent sized invoices, I believe, that are hanging out there. We just allocated $20,000 of new landscaping to be done. We want to do approximately, I'm guessing 10,000 more on tree line because much of what we're working on hasn't been touched in 10, 15 years and needs an grade. And the way we've been doing it, we've been doing an upgrade and then you kind of look and see what you have and then you go back through again and redo it one more time to make it look the way you want. You know, if you want to say, come up with 5%, okay, whack 5% off. You pick the area because all I'm going to try and do is stay within what I have left and move funds around. And it just depends on what comes up. If we decide we're going to do electrical and get that in somewhat decent shape, new plants, I'll take it out of there. Right now I have, if I take off what we've allocated as of our last meeting, I probably have $70,000 left in that area. Do I anticipate paying $70,000 for new plants for the rest of this budget year? No, but I do anticipate paying for painting and benches. And that's where I'm going to go get it from. So I can't tell you where exactly I would take it from because for me, this is a pool and I keep having to pull from one area where I have some excess to go into other areas where the expectation is that our budget will take care of it.
Well, and I think it would be especially difficult as a new committee trying to say what has been catch up, what is, you know, our standard spend. So I totally understand your predicament here with that, so.
Aren't we also covered that, I mean, the work groups are gonna do great to try to stay on a level basis. I'm fully confident of that, but we have unassigned reserves too that we can back up on if absolutely necessary, right?
Or a spend,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
there's what did
I
we
mean,
say,
if,
$500,000?
Yeah, there's about $500,000.
Well,
Yeah.
and our underspend from last year for
It was
landscaping
300,000.
was almost
Right.
200.
It was the money they transferred over after the hurricane, but you
Right.
did, I mean, if it wasn't for the hurricane, you still would have underspent that.
Right.
Yeah.
Is all the hurricane damage been replaced and done and fixed?
Yep.
Awesome.
Any other questions for Mark?
Oh, yeah, I just have.
You please come up to the microphone.
Bob Geppert from GSCDD. One comment to keep in front of yourselves is the budget at the present time for irrigation and irrigation repairs and maintenance is nothing. We really have no idea what that's going to cost. It's right now it's shared between us and PPCA and the golf course. And we are just starting to get into that can of worms. So it's going to come down sometime, 24, 25, 26, but just keep it in the back of your mind. There is a looming expense. Thank you.
Oh, fun. Doug,
I just,
That's a rebuttal.
I just want to remind you, when you, your comment of the half
Thank
mil
you, Mark.
unassigned reserves of 100 and some were in ponds, I'll call it carryover. But last board meeting, you put 100,000 back into out of that fund to cover the additional expense for, so it's not as much as it is the report might show, because you authorized, the board did 100,000 to move over from there to cover the double cost of the bank restoration.
yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mark, for.
could I also make one comment? Yanni just showed up not too long ago. I don't think she signed in, but I don't know if everybody knows
Oh, yeah,
Yanni
please
or
sign in
not.
if you could.
Yeah, if you don't know her, she took Jen's place.
Right. Welcome, Yanni. Okay, so then we are down to our last, which is safety and security. Let's just take a look at that one. That's gonna be a little bit of a kludge.
And Dean's not here, so I was working with him on that, and we basically one of the things that we wanted to do was to split the road and sidewalk repairs and maintenance into 2 line items, if that's possible, so that we can track sidewalk repairs versus street repairs individually going forward. But we were trying to maintain basically a neutral operating budget, but on our first cut through, we were working with the amended 24 budget, which had 60,000 put into it this year. So we want to go back and kind of rework and reduce some of the areas to try to get down to the 708,000, which was the 23 budget,
23 or 24?
24. Which was really the first year that safety and security was totally
You
put
guys
out,
have
so
the
we're
same,
kind
the
of-
same issue. Yeah, we
we're-
don't, that's our baseline.
And
Prior,
there's-
the only thing they had was the, just the wiser
Security.
contract. Everything else was under,
And
capital.
it's a little hard to tell because some of the road expenses that should have been probably charged to capital were charged to the maintenance, and they got to journal them out. So we're still trying to figure out where we're at this year. So, but the goal is to try to keep it flat from the operating budget. No, they're doing that this fall or this summer.
The current contract expires at the end of September. So I know safety and security is working on their scope right now.
So we may be over.
Or under,
We've already sent Wiser a notice of violation.
Oh, yeah.
couple of them.
Couple of
Yeah, we have a meeting. Yeah, we have a meeting with them. Next, yeah, I know it's coming up. I don't remember when it is.
Dan's gonna
Soon.
put the hammer down.
That's my job.
Oh. The hammer.
I don't know, we haven't addressed anything recently in our subcommittee, so. As far as capital, we basically had roadway restoration as a capital item going forward. We looked at the Tech to Tret report, and it has to do all the streets would be like $4.2 million or somewhere in there. I don't have it's over $4 million. If you divide that over 15 years, it's about 275,000 a year. So we were proposing to start a program of about 300,000 a year to start resurfacing roads over the next 15 years. The reserve study didn't really have any roads being redone for another 3 or 4 years. So there were a lot of things left out of the reserve study that was done a couple of years ago that probably should have been in there. So we have to all these items that, capital items that we're looking at basically from the infrastructure, we got to kind of rework and rethink. The other item that we had in here was streetlight replacement. It's going to be about 450,000 if we go with the Florida Power and Light as an upfront cost, for them to put in the, so we we were thinking to spread that over the next 3 years to get funding for that into the capital reserve. And then the other speed calming device there that we're putting in, that should be a capital. So we added that. So it ended up just in the streets that in 25, we're probably looking at about 450,000. And if we look at how we were looking at those capital items over 5 years, it's approximately 400,000 a year we would have to fund our capital reserves.
On top of the 200,000?
No.
Okay. It's to slide in.
Instead of the 200, we'd have to fund it at 400 just to keep our capital reserves at about the 3 million mark.
And this is Hista, because this is your first year on here too. This is a question that comes up each year. I'm not asking, it's a discussion that comes up during budget time is, do you want to collect these funds to put them into your capital reserve fund, or do you want to fund them from your existing capital reserve fund? I'm not making a recommendation either way, but that's a discussion that comes up each year. And usually it comes up when it gets down to the bottom line and you see like what the impact of the assessment is going to be. I have no preference either way. It's all numbers. So, I mean, but that is just something to take into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, our intent was to look at what our capital expenditures would be over the next 5 years. Some up, some down, but then to basically fund those expenditures over on a level platform over 5 years, so that we basically keep our capital reserve at the end of the 5 years is basically what we started with.
Consistent.
So even though we're funding the capital reserves at 400,000 a year under this, you know, 1 year we might do more streets and we might pull 500,000 out of it, but the next year we might only do 300,000 worth of streets. But on average, we're doing that. We're keeping our capital reserves until we get a much better picture of what we really need to hold in our capital reserves for future work.
Daniel,
Sir.
how much did we spend on the 2 roads this year?
We're doing the second one.
44,000 for the first road. The second road is gonna be a little over 50. I think it's 53 off the top of my head.
And around 100 total.
Yeah, 100 total.
Yeah.
Not 3.
Well, they were relatively small roads too.
The smallest roads, pretty much.
Yeah, Diamante was about 43,000.
Okay, Demonte is a small road, Reno Drive is small.
Yeah, it's about 53,000.
Not that much difference.
So,
But still, it's 100,000 versus 3,000. And we still have no economics, still have no economic study on the street lighting, right? 'Cause we don't know
Correct.
how
They
much
haven't
we're
delivered
paying
it
for
yet.
the lighting on
No.
tree line.
We're waiting for we haven't gotten the information back from FPL yet.
and realizing that the street lighting project wouldn't come for a year or two, but if we start putting the funds away a little bit now and pay for that over 5 years, even if it's in year 3.
And then the 50,000 that you want to just keep back into your operating budget for road repairs, is
Yeah.
that just spot repairs or
That's spot repairs, potholes, things like that.
things like the front of our development as you come in?
Yeah. Yeah, Carol's identified 4 or 5 potholes on Pelican Preserve there in that first stretch, so.
Okay.
They haven't yet. It has been brought up, but whether or not we should investigate that, I think we want to get the experience with the first one first and see how it works and see what we might do. I think we might need gates at a lot of the stop signs too, just so that people stop at stop signs, so.
Commercial vehicles.
We're the only two that can.
No, I do.
Oh, this morning at the main 4-way stop, I was stopped there and 4 golf carts came right in a row and didn't even stop from the golf club and didn't stop. They just went straight through the intersection. Assumed they had the right of way. Yeah.
Any other questions on?
And I know the idea would be to fund, the streetlight sidewalk replacement program out of our operating there. Down the road, we might have to look at a bigger program, one is a capital where we're doing large stretches. But we want to get the street program going first, and street signs would be, most of that replacement would be funded out of the operating where we have the street sign budget. But we haven't really, we know we have to start looking at replacing some of the street signs, or at least the sign part of the posts and stuff, so.
The increase in contract security services is just your estimate of
Just an
what
estimate.
it's, because they're still got to go out for bids and
Right.
take a look at it anyway. So we don't know exactly what that's going to be.
So does anybody else decide to pay for the roadway restoration a little excessive at 300,000 a year.
Well, I think that in general, I understand where his thinking is. I don't know if that's where we will land. So it's just, you're kind of waiting
I
for.
think there's room to further.
Can I inject?
Yeah.
So I understand your point of view when we look at year over end, when we're just starting this program. I could easily do 5 or 6 of these auxiliary roads, not the arterial roads, right? The soft, smaller roads. Now you start getting into major road repair on like Pelican Preserve Boulevard or a longer stretch, you're gonna want to start budgeting that and reserving it so we can build up to be able to take care of those roads. So there's a rhyme and reason between one side and the other. If we're looking at focusing primarily on your auxiliary roads versus your arterial roads, your primary roads, then yes, it's a little fluffed up versus what I can do. But it's also up to the Safety Security Committee to what roads they want to prioritize based off of the Tetra Tech report and our sanity check on ground to say which roads are in real disrepair and need to be addressed.
I think there's a couple of, I mean, when we looked at the Tetra Tech report, if we did all the roads over a 15-year period, it'd be 200, it'd be levelized 275,000 a year that you'd have to fund. That was, a couple years old based on dollars from a couple years ago. So we just rounded up to 300,000. The 2 short roads that we did that we got good pricing, there was essentially no curb or gutter work that needed to be done. Aviano that was done a couple of years ago was over 400,000. I think Avila. Yeah, I mean,
Marty,
so-
as soon as you get into anything beyond just mill and repair, really mill and replace, repave, and you get into any valley gutter issues, the pricing goes up substantially because you're not only just looking at valley gutters, you're now looking at the storm system, you're now looking at the boxes that are associated with it and the price. That's the price driver. That really is.
Yes.
You've been fortunate that it's just been mill and pave.
Yes, the roads that we've done so far with minor patchwork on valley gutter repairs.
Now, I haven't seen a report yet, but this roadway repair, does it include bridges?
Good question. Good question.
I love you, Marty.
I don't believe it does.
Okay, so a question then be, I haven't seen the report yet. Are we expecting any repairs that we have to do, or any maintenance?
So we just had Volker come out and do bridge inspections. They owe me a report by the 18th of April. So
Supposed to be on your May meeting.
correct. Once I have that report in hand, then that'll drive some decision making.
Because you've got to assume there's going to be something. I mean, from what you've noticed, even.
I don't know, Ed, looks like to me that you've done a good job of here trying to figure out a flat, well, actually, less than flat, but, and I like the idea that you plugged in this 300,000 per year. And if nothing else, even if it's excessive, it's a savings for us in case we do run into a major problem down the road. So I'm in favor of it.
Same here.
Well, if we put all of these together, what are we looking at?
I haven't plugged anything in yet because it wasn't approved or anything, so I don't know yet.
I put it into my fancy spreadsheet here.
The unofficial Ed spreadsheet.
And this is all with the safety and security as we had it, that we at the, scroll up here at the 768.5, which we wanted to try to reduce the 60,000 out of that. But with this 768.5, if you add in a 60,000 for the HOA agreement and 9,800 for assessment collection, which is basically what it was in last year's budget. And if we do the reserve capital at 400,000, the total budget is 3.6 million versus 3.3 in the approved 24 budget. So it's about 11% increase.
And we definitely know that's not sustainable. That is not going to fly.
No.
you know, with our goal to keep everything flat, you know, we have to look at what would have to happen.
I had one question that I didn't know because I haven't been here just in long, but I know Bob gave me a list of what the increases have been over the last years. But one of the things that was happening is we were still building out Pelican Preserve, so there were new households coming on that, you know, kept the assessment flat.
Mm.
But at some point, and I don't know what year it was, those increased numbers of units or doors basically stopped because they were fully being assessed. And so it's going to be harder going forward to keep increases down like they may have been because they were off. The costs that were increasing were offset by more doors to assess it across. So the assessment would be less. But now that we're fully built out, you know, every door is going to have to, you know, bear that. We don't have a broader base to spread the increases across. So.
I don't think, any of the residents in mentioned before, it does. So I think 11% increase. It's not.
And if we take like change drop ours,
I can have.
if I drop ours down, it's something messed up
So
here.
we just went back to the $200,000 in our capital reserve. What would that do?
For some reason, it's not calculating.
Darn spreadsheets.
Oh. With ours, with safety and security flat, it's 9.2% increase. And if you reduce the 400,000 down to 200,000, it's 3.15.
So it just gives you
And-
an
and it-
idea of the scope that we would need to be reduced.
And again, what we have to come up with by the May date is the high water mark, then it can be reduced.
Right.
Now, if you do only fund at 200,000, which is what was funded for the past several budget cycles, you know, to do these capital projects, we'd be drawing down our capital reserves.
Do we have any kind of a statement of what is a minimum capital reserve that we should be sitting at?
The reserve study, I think it came up with where we were sitting. It recommended funding at about 175,000 levels, some 140, 130, in that mid 100,000 range. But there were a lot of things that just weren't included in that reserve study. There's almost nothing for ponds, pond restoration. There was nothing for ever having to do the trail around the preserve, boardwalk. There were just a lot of, and they didn't have any roads starting for another 3 or 4 years. So there were just a lot of kind of discrepancies that I saw within. So don't hold a lot of trust in that reserve study, but anyway, and from the reserves right now, these are unofficial ed numbers because they don't have the audited numbers, but the capital reserves is about 2.8 million, but we're adding 200, but we're also doing projects this year. So it's liable to stay about that 2.8, 2.9 million. Ponds has around 150,000. They had 90 and then there were 140 added, and then we subtracted 100. So it'll have about 140 or 50,000 going into next year. Landscaping will have about 290,000 in reserves. And, Mark offered up using, we could transfer that 300,000 from the landscaping reserves into capital reserves, or to help fund the capital reserves, or to take part of it to make up the difference, fund it at 200 and take 200 and still get the 400 this year, and maybe kind of work up into the future. And we have a unassigned, or what I would rather call surplus, of about 500,000 in our unassigned account, that when you subtract all this and subtract our remaining budget, but we need funds to carry us from the end of the budget year through November till we start getting assessments in. So there's a month or two in there where we have expenses, but no additional revenues coming in.
What's your cash deposit still?
Yeah.
So we got with that.
So you probably can't dip too much into that unassigned category to pull from.
And my request normally is to try not to spend anything from there until at least January, to give us a chance to have the tax dollars sent in and applied and sent to us.
One thing that wouldn't be very popular with our committee is spent. What about at the end of each budget year, whatever they don't have already assigned, we roll into the capital reserves instead of having it be a slush fund?
I like to have something in reserve that not depleting it altogether. It's not.
I think part of, Doug's had probably the most experience over the years, but it seems like there's always things where we have expenditures that we think are going to be in the one budget year, they're planned, and things, they don't happen on time and they actually come out of the following year. So carrying the unspent from one year in a reserve into the next is probably good, but if there's a reserve going in, how do you just keep accumulating?
Do you have a max?
Yeah.
Seems to me if we could get it down to that 3 something or other high mark, we can come up with that 3 something or other percent to get it flat. That's just my thought. So which means that you'd have to take the reserves from 400 down to 200 to get to that 3 whatever.
This is Bob Geppert again. And I want you to look at it from the perspective of time, because when ponds started out, we didn't handle the safety and security or the landscaping. So the thought process within ponds and why they maintained a reserve or the carryover money every year was because there was a lot of consideration to costly multi-year projects, such as the aeration, such as the pond bank replenishment or repairs we made initially. So, we didn't really get back and forth into capital reserves as a committee, because when we started, we had no capital reserve, zero. So that's how ponds got to where they are. You're certainly free to change all that, but it's a lot easier for the subcommittees if they kept the money rather than coming back every year and justifying projects.
I'm not saying I would advocate.
No, I just was.
I just believe we should throw everything else.
Absolutely. And all I want to do is give the perspective of the past. And that's how they got to where they are.
Slush fund, I'm okay as long as you take into account, and some of that's justified. Like for the ponds group, we had a $50,000 thing that billed on 10/1, the first day of the new year. And it was in last year's budget, it was in 9/30 budget instead of 10/1. So that went into this was slush fund reserve, whatever you want to call it, that 50K. Yeah, if I could not justify why that was there, I'm okay with it going somewhere, because that's the budget I was trying to run to. But actually, if you really look at it for with the money that came across at the end of last year, I overspent. If you look at the things that didn't bill, the only reason I made budget last year was because the things didn't bill. If they had all billed on time, I would have overspent my budget by a certain amount of money, by about 40K.
If we get to a point where we have to have like 3%, will you reduce your salary?
Yeah. Or I'll double my salary and you'll still have the same expense.
One thing
Maybe we
that'll
should
be-
all take a pay cut, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One thing that'll be a little easier this year is now that, since we transitioned mid-year and I have a better feel by the end of this fiscal year, where we're at as far as encumbrances. So like any of the jobs that are out there that have purchase orders that we did, I know that those dollars are already allocated. So at the end of the year, I can look and see, okay, here's what we still have outstanding. How much of this can I expect to actually bill in the next fiscal year? And we call it carry forward. We like accommodate that into the next budget year then. So then we would like pre-allocate those funds and they wouldn't go into the
So they
unassigned
wouldn't
reserve
count
fund.
against our percentage for the next year.
And
Would it-
I need to.
Yeah, they wouldn't,
All the previous fiscal years budget.
yes.
I want to point out the numbers that I've got assume there's like three district buckets: administrative, operational, admin, and operating expenses. In my calculations, I assumed a 5% increase on those. So I don't know what the district might be looking at on those budget line items or whatever, but just in my numbers. So if they come in less than 5%, that will help that bottom line number as well.
Yeah. And again, I mean, your point of this is high water, so we don't want to scalp ourselves at this point.
Right.
But we also don't want to be flagrant.
Yep.
Usually the high water mark is just to put everything in there that you want to do, because that way you're covered. Because you can't add anything after this. So anything that you think you may possibly want to do next year, put it in your budget. You're not locked in. This is not what people are actually going to pay. That happens in August.
I think we have to do some due diligence with that.
No, I
Because
do
when
understand that.
When they
yeah.
put the letter out to all the residents and say, here's what your potential increase may be, then that's the first thing they see, and then they don't see the cuts. Right?
Yeah, I'm not saying go nuts and have a 25% increase, but what I'm saying is make sure that, like Peggy said, that you include everything in here. Don't shortchange yourself based on what the potential increase in your assessment could be.
And it's encouraging to me that if we were going to make a cut per se, that it would be in not increasing our reserves as much. Because that does say that we're playing pretty well to what we'd already budgeted. So,
And historically, that is where you guys have taken your cuts, is not putting the extra money into the reserves to help offset the increases for the other things that you want to do in the year. Not saying you have to do it. I'm just
No,
saying
no, I
historically, that's what's
understand.
happened.
but it's not necessarily a sustainable model.
Correct.
So,
Too many questions. Maybe I actually have more questions than Bob.
That's being recorded. We have that for all time.
Oh,
The only question in the debate, capital reserves, what's the main thing capital reserves is intended for?
capital projects.
Main thing is the roads. If you look at the study, right? Or wrong?
Ponds would fall into that too.
Yeah.
The capital
Well,
If it's a
reserves.
big project.
could-
But I think the majority of it is the roads. So,
And
I mean, you're
bridges.
concerned about using capital expenditures for what it was intended to be used for.
one of the.
That's just a comment.
Yeah,
it-
understood that. Thank you.
And we had a discussion with Daniel on some of this, what delineates maintenance versus what is capital, and some of it there's a 10,000. And it has to be 10,000 to be capital, but that's not the only thing. But on roads, if you're just doing patching, that's
Yeah.
maintenance. It's unless you take it back to its kind of original state. So like on ponds, at some point, they probably, your bank replacement, it could go either way, but you're doing it out of the operating and as
Right.
maintenance. But at some point, if we have to dredge the ponds, that'll be a huge expense. That's what the capital reserves are supposed to build up to cover some of those
Right.
big items that would take those capital assets back to their kind of full useful life. That's kind of how I view it. Or like the speed hump, we're putting in a new piece of the infrastructure that's going to have a useful life. And, you know, I'm not sure where some of the things, but like the signage and things for the bicycle lane. You could probably go either way on that. What's the cost of, you know, because we're recreating a bicycle lane. So the striping and the signs could potentially be a capital, or it could just be done under operating. So in the past, I think most everything's been done under the operating, because we haven't had these big capital expenditures like the roads and stuff, except for the preserve boardwalk and and then the roads. So we're kind of in new territory. And if we have to replace a bridge sometime, you know, hopefully we just do maintenance on bridges for a long time. So. But that's where when I looked through that reserve study, there were things that, you know, the trail around the preserve, at some point that's going to have to be redone. That would be a capital expense to
Well,
recreate
even
all of it.
the small part that we did was what?
10,000.
What was the,
10,000.
But it was maintenance, so
right,
yeah, it's just small enough.
It was only 60 feet.
but it looked really nice.
It looks really nice.
And it's getting a lot of use with the alligator lately.
It's 25 years old.
One of the things that, while we've got everybody here, that, you know, the street lighting, if we have Florida Power and Light use street lighting, they're going to what they call speed trench most of that in. So things like, you know, Mark was talking about the lighting, you know, at the front, all that landscape lighting and stuff. You know, do we really want to do that until after the street lighting gets put in, because it's liable to be tore up when the street lighting gets put in? Same thing with some of the irrigation. You know, irrigation's probably going to have repairs along with it when they go through and do that. And that's all part of what we have to look at. But then also tree trimming, because when you relocate the lights and some of that, the trees are going to need to be trimmed to get the proper lighting. So, you know, that one project like the street lighting could impact multiple areas, and we need to really coordinate some of these investments that we're doing. We don't want to be like the city where they come in and, you know, redo a street and then come along, you know, the next year and the electric utility digs it up to put in a new electric line, and now you've got a patch in a brand new street and stuff. So
What is the potential timing?
I think it's going to be at least 2 years.
Probably 18 to 24 months at least, yeah.
We haven't started the gateway yet. They got to shut.
And they're supposed to be doing ours this summer. That's what they say.
Well, you guys are gonna be our guinea pig to see how
Yeah.
fast they complete.
Right.
For cost.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, that's a very, very good point.
And what's their timeliness on repairs?
And
Is there?
That's P&L.
that's a trick question, Marty.
Okay,
So I know the Public Utilities Commission in Massachusetts requires like poles to be replaced within a certain amount of time, lighting to be replaced within a certain amount of time, and the utility typically does not meet that. Typically, they're supposed to fix it within 9 months, and they're lucky if they get it fixed within a year and a half. Is that our expectation here if we go with FP&L lighting?
Yeah, we don't have an agreement yet. I haven't seen the agreement I'm assuming those timeframes will be part of the agreement, but we don't have that yet.
What's our next step here? To put something together to give to Laura?
well, that's what we have to say is that, you know, individually, each of these budgets, do we say go forward with those and just to bring down the reserve to the 200,000 mark?
Well, I think some of us, we have to wait to see where the district come in on some of their items. I can work with the safety and security to reduce ours and get a revision, but then what we do with the reserves. I don't know if anybody's identified any other potential capital projects, but
Trouble is, Ed, we can't wait too long.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And we're just looking for the high water mark basically right now. But I would assume that the whole committee agrees that we need to try to really get this to a flat budget eventually. Is that right? Everybody agree with that?
We're decreasing.
Well,
Oh, hope springs eternal.
yeah,
well, if you fund the capital reserves at 200,000, you're at about a 3% increase.
which I think we could handle probably.
High water mark.
Yeah,
And then we can
And then we can tweak.
decide
Right,
independently if we want to take some of the landscaping reserves and move it to capital or whatever.
right.
Well, our communication is not the best.
In terms of,
Residents in Pelican Preserve do not know what Gateway District does for them. So if they see a 3% increase, they're gonna say, why? You don't do anything for me.
now, we had that really well-attended session, when Chelsea and Laura and Randy, they were over. I mean, I think that moved us forward paces. And then we've got the potential cards and everything that we're working on for the PR. So, I mean, I think we've got steps in place that we're trying, and as much as any of us can do colloquially, while we talk to our neighbors, I spend a lot of my time educating.
If maybe I'm too rational, but with the way the inflation's been, if I saw that the budget was only going to go up 3%, I'd be,
Yeah.
Well, and I know we're talking now about our responsibilities to Gateway or to the assets that they have. But then again, we're also talking PPCA and their budget, and that's what the people will really see is the fees over there. So, we
We haven't really pushed anything to them other than the park. I mean, there are some
Yeah.
things that are flowing their way.
Well, what I'm
Nothing
saying
else
is
to
that's
it.
what the people are gonna see. They're gonna see two budgets. They're gonna see this one, they're gonna see that one. So what we can do from this side, the best is, I think, what we really need to shoot for. And the PPCA is gonna have to work on theirs.
It's gonna be a challenge. So,
and this does have in it, or what I had was, I guess the other area is the HOA agreement. My calculation has 60,000, which was the 5,000 a month.
right,
Yeah,
and
that-
whether or not that ever.
Whether or not that actually, but that could be adjusted as part of as we get further down the line from the high water mark.
It's good to
So
have.
they haven't even met on that yet.
Well, they're still in
They haven't even met yet.
yeah, I was gonna say the.
We've met a lot on it.
Yeah.
We just haven't met
They haven't had a
recently.
meeting with them.
Yeah,
We have some conversations.
So I think for the high water mark, leaving that in I would think would be good. It could be reduced if we,
And this is a worksheet that we had for the current fiscal year budget that we did last year for capital projects. This is the Pelican sheet that I have up on the screen here. And then we had, I don't think there was anything on ponds. This is really hard to read, sorry.
yeah, and a lot of those items that were on the
Yeah, go back.
capital list.
yeah, go
were
back to the capital.
Covered in the operating budgets as well, so.
Doing that one's doing. Yeah, there's a lot.
See. And Mark mentioned monument lighting, and they had 16,000 a year in that, but. To me, unless each monument is gonna cost more than, lighting is gonna cost more than 10,000, it should be in the operating. It's not a. Each
Unless they do the
lighting, each
wholesale.
monument is. It is, to me, is the capital asset, and
Well, that's
So
to go
they're
from
not gonna be that.
fluorescent
that-
LEDs, right?
So,
That's fluorescent LED said. That was fluorescent to LED, a bigger project.
The lighting on the monuments is
Moving
to go from fluorescent lighting to LEDs, right?
I'm still not,
The lighting on the monuments.
Right.
Supposed to go from fluorescent lights to LEDs, right?
So that was gonna be the bigger. not
That's
just
the expense.
maintenance Kind of,
right, but on a per monument basis,
Which are 32,
they're not, it's not.
39.
so I'm feeling like we're sort of settled on submitting the actual budgets the way that they were submitted by our subcommittee heads with the change of bringing the capital reserve in total down to 200,000, keeping in the 60,000 because the unknown with the O&M. And anything else?
I'll get Laura a revision of the safety and security that
That'd be
brings us
great.
down to this 708 to keep it flat.
Yeah, because then it will show in both places.
Well, knowing that we can make changes later on, I think that's fine.
I agree.
That'll give us our high water mark and let's go for it.
Marty,
Do-
thoughts?
Do it.
I know you'd like to be below zero.
So the 60,000 that we have in reserve for the KW agreement. I don't have any faith that we'll have that agreement this year.
I think that's.
And to tell you the truth, that contract was supposed to be an interim contract to get us through a transition period. Well, we don't have that now, so why bother spending the 60,000?
And that may be well something that we can take out. Yeah, I agree. Done.
I agree with you. 3% is good.
Question, Dale, do we have any power washers, Kubotas, anything like that that's envisioned to purchase?
No,
New makes sense.
honestly, that's gonna be the item there, is storage. So we have a Kubota and we have a pressure washing tractor that has a trailer and it's very oversized. It's a 16-foot combination between the trailer and the tractor. And we have been working very diligently on trying to find space.
We'll have it this month.
So where we can put things and how we store items over there for maintenance work. Envisioning any new equipment over there. Not at the moment, other than maybe a trailering system to be able to bring things back and forth.
30-foot trailer to store.
Well, depending on, so leaving it there and then if we have to trailer it back for any other items. So maybe a trailer, but it's not gonna be a very large expense. That's it. I'm not planning on budgeting for anything else beyond that.
Well, I do know Waste Management has some land for sale.
And you don't want to store it at our storage unit out there because they steal stuff out of there.
That's been bad.
If it's not on wheels, it'll be tough to steal.
Yeah.
Well, one of the items would be putting a storage container out there that I can lock and secure. So unless they want to pick up a freight Connex, doubt that's going anywhere.
Yeah, probably not. So Ed, thoughts? You're good? Sharon? No? 100%. All right. Clear on direction? Yep. Okay. Anything else that we need to cover?
Sorry, I was late.
It's allowed.
We got stuff done though because of.
Yeah. We said, let's talk about everything before he gets here. All right. So I think we're clear to go. Thank you to everybody who attended. We appreciate all your input.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Peggy.